There has been pretty serious, pretty intense conversation on that terrible killing of the United Health CEO, Brian Thompson, ever since the day it happened. Now, Luigi Mangione has pled not guilty to 11 charges. That's the update in that court process as of last week. He faces murder and terrorism charges. But the case, and separate from the actual sort of calls for vigilante-style attacks on people, the case itself has really brought to the fore much deeper, larger concerns and conversations about growing inequality in America. So that begins with the healthcare system and doesn't even end there. There are people who've worked in the industry now who are also using this moment to speak out. A former executive writing in this New York Times piece that what he saw made him quit a long while back. That's Wendell Potter, who worked at Cigna in their corporate communications. Looking at this particular case, he says it's reinvigorated a conversation that they had about suppressing, basically, these very critiques in an industry that puts, quote, profits above patients. And much of the discussion that began with the sort of initial debate about, well, murder is wrong and murder is murder and killing someone in broad daylight is wrong, that piece of it, which goes to law and order and crime, quickly morphed into the larger conversation of, even if that is true, and hopefully most people in a civilized society still believe in that rule of law and against violence, but if you agree with that, then what happens when other people are taking actions that lead to avoidable loss of life? And you don't need to have the lawyerly sort of academic discussion about what you call it. Do you call that negligence? Do you call that manslaughter? It's certainly different than first-degree murder, but ethically, what do we do about that? And is that what we want? And is that acceptable with companies that already make a lot of money claiming they're going to provide you health coverage in the event that you need it, and when you need it most, they deny you? The rich are also getting richer against this backdrop. I want to show you just one headline. There are many out there, but when you look at the hoarding of wealth by a small group of people, Bloomberg, the financial outlet, notes that the world's 500 richest people are now holding $10 trillion in wealth this year. And if all boats were rising in this tide, you might have a different dynamic or reaction to that, even though that is an incredible amount of wealth hoarding that can't possibly be spent in those people's lifetimes and likely the lifetimes of their children. But when you look at this, the raw national data, which we have from the federal government, the median wage an American is making is just over $1,000 a week in the first quarter of 24, which doesn't get you very far, and that's before you run into unplanned health costs, which might be the thing that saves or doesn't save the life of you or your loved ones. Americans have very few options against rising inequality and a heck of a lot of understandable rage about the people at the top doing this. With all that said, I want to bring in the very person I quoted. Wendell Potter worked as a senior corporate executive in communications at Cigna. He wrote that op-ed for the Times, and he's written several books and been called upon long before this recent incident to discuss what is wrong with this healthcare industry, as well as how other healthcare reforms like Obamacare function. He leads the Lower Out-of-Pocket Now coalition. You might be the ideal guest for a non-ideal situation in America. Welcome.
Thank you, Ari. Good to be on your show.
Let's start with the point I raised, that if you put aside what I'm calling somewhat legal semantics, there has to be a regulatory, a societal, and an ethical obligation of these healthcare companies to provide the care they promise rather than deny it to people who played by the rules, paid in, and are facing life and death situations.
There should be, and there used to be. It's not been so many years ago that was kind of the way health insurance worked in this country. But in the mid-1990s, things changed. And back then or before then, most of us got our health insurance from nonprofit Blue Cross plans or other nonprofit organizations. Since then, the big companies that dominate the industry are New York Stock Exchange corporations, mega corporations that have really put profits over the needs of patients for many, many years now. And this is what happens when you allow Wall Street to run your system of health insurance. These companies have to show these investors and Wall Street financial analysts every 3 months that they're meeting those investors' profit expectations. And they do that in ways that make it more and more difficult for people to get the care that they need and to be able to afford that care, even if they have health insurance. That's why I lead that coalition, because one of the ways that they have been able to penalize us and make it so difficult for us to get the care that we need is making us pay tens of thousands of dollars in many cases for our care before our insurance policies will kick in these days.
Yeah. When you look at what they sometimes call medical ethics, there are situations that are difficult, but where doctors might land on the side of not providing a certain type of care. Someone who is 90 years old, terminal, and a very complex procedure may or may not add some months, and the doctors say no. And that still can be heart-wrenching and debatable. I want to be very clear, and a lot of people watching or living in America know this already, right? Although, Wendell, I don't know if you know, sometimes on the news we tell people things they already know. That's not the main issue here. The issue are situations where someone needs life-saving care. The doctors are ready to do it. And as you said, it's the Wall Street-driven corporation. So I want to read from an example you give where you write that this helped you decide to leave. 2008, a 17-year-old leukemia patient in California had a scheduled liver transplant. And then it was, you write, postponed at the last minute when Cigna told her surgeons that the company, Cigna, would not pay. And then you explain how these things go down. Her family stirred up so much media attention that Cigna relented. But it was too late. She died a few hours after Cigna's change of heart. Tell us about that and what it reveals, that the company is, according to that story, literally trying to see what it can get away with, including a situation that might result in the loss of life that otherwise is savable. But if there's too much heat, they back down, which raises the question, why couldn't they have done the thing they're supposed to do, provide the health coverage to begin with?
Yeah, what these companies do is they know that most people take a denial as the final answer, and that most people will not fight that denial. They will not pursue an appeal that they're entitled to. In this case, Natalie Sarkeesian's family did. Cigna still said no, so the company became the family became a very squeaky wheel, and it became a huge PR nightmare for Cigna, and the company eventually relented. This happens all the time when a case becomes something that the media takes an interest in. The insurance company in question will usually relent and reverse that denial because they want that PR problem to go away. But they just are counting on people not knowing how to even appeal a decision, even if it's life-threatening. And also keep in mind that most people, when you're sick, you just don't have the energy and sometimes the ability to advocate for yourself. And it can be a very complicated procedure because these companies purposely make it very difficult. Only about 10% or fewer people actually appeal these denials. When they do, the majority are approved. So that just goes to show you that medically necessary care is being denied day in and day out. And often it's deadly, as it was for Natalie Sarkeesian. It happens every single day. And it's only occasionally that a story captures the media's attention.